Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Ken Phelps with the Daytona Regional Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our webinar, The Real Deal Discussions with Jim Chisholm, Daytona Beach City Manager on Daytona Beach's COVID-19 Assistance Recovery Effort Program. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started this morning. If they are not already, please remember to mute your microphone so everybody can hear the information that's being presented. If you have a question or a comment during today's presentation or following, we'll have a brief Q&A. Please use the chat function in Zoom. Submit your question that way, and we'll keep an eye on the chat box so we can get to as many questions as possible during the session. If you miss something, we are recording the session so that you'll be able to watch it afterwards. It will be posted to our DaytonaChamber.com COVID-19 resource page, as well as on the Daytona Regional Chamber's YouTube channel. Today's program is sponsored by Florida Power and Light. We're glad to have their support, and I would ask your attention for the following message.
At FPL, the safety of our crews, our community, our neighbors is number one. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have temporarily suspended non-emergency in-person visits while our crews continue to perform essential work in your neighborhoods. Please, if you see them working, it's important to maintain 6 feet of distance at all times for the health and safety of everyone in our community. It's just the neighborly thing to do.
All right. Thank you again very much to Florida Power and Light for their sponsorship of today's webinar. Now it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Jim Chisholm, City Manager for the City of Daytona Beach. He began his career in municipal management in 1974 and has served in administration roles in Leon, St. Lucie, and DeSoto counties. His career also includes stints as City Manager in St. Cloud, in South Padre Island, Texas, and in Isla Morada Village of Islands in Florida. In 2007, the International City County Management Association recognized Jim for 30 years of service as a professional city manager. So with that, Jim, we thank you very much for your time and expertise and sharing some information with our local businesses and residents on the relief program to try and help everybody get through this outbreak situation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with everybody this morning. It's the first time I've done this too, so we'll try to get through it with some order. But it's always great to be in Daytona Beach, and we've been very fortunate in our management and financial capabilities within the city to provide assistance. So back in March, when we all became aware of the seriousness of the disease that was ravishing the country and the world, in fact, we began looking at our resources and say, okay, how can we move forward, keep the city financially afloat, and at the same time provide benefits to the employees and to the businesses. So we took a few days to identify the funding, and we already have a healthy emergency reserve fund that is for this purpose. So we went into the reserves, and we have projected spending about $5.65 million in various programs that I'm going to describe to you in just a second. But our intent was, number one, try to help those most in need initially. Number two, try to find a way to assist the businesses at the same time. And number three, be prepared to come back to work when this is over and provide some incentives for that reinvestment in our community. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty significant task. So the first phase was trying to give the residents that are impacted, and we decided to identify the water and wastewater bills, which is a pretty significant impact on every household and business. We determined that our ability to offset those costs for a month would be a worthy endeavor, and we did take that on. At this point, we have 22,850 customers that are benefiting from that program, and the city has taken the reserves we have in general fund and paying for those water and wastewater costs, as well as the some of the recycling costs too. So that was our first initiative. The second thing we did was how are we going to help with keeping the businesses afloat in the long term. And we looked at our reserves in the building functions to offset the cost for the new businesses coming into the city that are trying to open up and develop our community. So we took the fees associated with issuing and building permits and the inspections, and we're incurring that cost internally, and we're not charging the customers for that. And with the hope, that's the hope, is we get these jobs that are in the construction industry, they continue to build, and we continue to move forward in building the base of our community. That was the goal. Everybody that is requiring a building permit then would have an opportunity to do that with those fees offset by the city. Now, the one thing that we did not, and mainly because we can't, the impact fees associated with those developments would still be required to be paid by those in the development community. So those are two of the, probably major projects that we took on. And I'm just trying to think of probably the next thing after waiving the permits. The impact of that was 330 permits and the construction value of $24.4 million in the year in construction value that's going to be contributed back to the city. The actual fee amount was $181,000 in that effort. Most of that was residential construction with 71 permits and 20 million in value. That program was running for 90 days. It will remain in effect till June 23rd of 2020. We're available and ready to assist with that effort. Our offices are all closed. The city's offices are closed. However, you can contact the building office by phone or fax or online, and we'll assist you in that way. The same is true of our utility bills. If you have questions about the utility bills at all, you can still call us at our city number and get questions answered with the utility bills. So we're still here, even though our doors are not open to the public as a result of this disease and crisis. The other program that we had is we took those businesses that are working on city properties that pay rent to the city, and we forgave those rents going forward, suspended rent payments for 90 days for those businesses. That's mainly some at the marina, at the Jackie Robinson Ballpark, the Daytona Beach Pier, Joe's Crab Shack, and a couple of others. Meanwhile, we have kept the golf course and tennis facilities open for the public, and the fees are still applicable there. So that's on the local level, that's over $5 million in incentive that we have given back to the community as an effort to try to keep us financially solvent, at the same time prosperous in moving forward for the new stuff that's going to get built. Just a word about the federal stimulus. There is some notice that we're all getting about all these funds and the millions of dollars that the federal government's putting forward. Unfortunately, a lot of that hasn't been making its way to the communities or particularly Daytona Beach. We do have a letter of notice of an allocation of $368,000. We're working with the federal HUD office to determine how that money can be used. That has not been finalized yet, but it is something that will be coming forward once we can identify specifically how it's to be used. There are some interim guidelines being provided, and we're trying to resolve those issues. In addition to that, we are going to go back and look at our HUD funding that is currently we already receive, and we may be reprogramming some of those funds to provide some rental assistance or assistance with other programs related to the COVID-19 issue. So that's in a broad brush, that's a snapshot of what we're doing as it relates to the incentive programs that city's involved in. City Commission has been very supportive. As you know, we've been meeting almost every week to discuss how we can help the community and what changes we can make that would make it easier for us to stay safe and at the same time be prepared to come back to work once we get notice from the state and the federal government. So we're waiting on our governor and the City Commission to take an action if we make any changes to the current activities of the city. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you guys got.
You bet, Jim. And we do have we've got a few that have come through, some email before the session started and some in the chat. So we'll get to those, but I'd like to start on behalf of the Daytona Chamber and everybody that's participating here this morning and the residents. Thank you to you and the City Council and Mayor Henry and everybody who really kind of approached this with what can be done to help people get through this crisis. It's certainly kind of an unusual, maybe even unprecedented time. The question that's come up a couple of times, and I think this is really a good business-oriented question, would the city consider lifting temporary restrictions on sign ordinances, particularly coming out of the crisis, to help Daytona Beach businesses advertise that they are back in operation, up and running, whether it's something simple as a stick in the mud sign kind of out at the roadway or banners or windows, signage, something like that. Is that something that's been discussed or would possibly be entertained?
It hasn't been discussed, but I think the commission would certainly be reasonable in reviewing under what parameters we could do that. And we don't want to make it an onerous process either, but we will put it as one of the things we need to take a look at for opening for business again, because that's very important to all of us.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be one of those with so much with so much out there and trying to get the word out as people are opening. That's going to be the hardest part, is getting that information out. So I think that will be very valuable. We have another question on the poorest residents in the community needing internet access, phone capability. Has the city talked through any effort to make sure everybody has access to internet connections, phone service, Wi-Fi? Has that been discussed at all on a city level?
No, it hasn't. By and large, most of that has been undertaken by the private sector rather than the city. At one time, we had some internet systems we were putting in place in the core part of the city, but it really never got to a point where it could work efficiently. And so I'm not sure how available it is currently, but I think, in my opinion, is the private sector is doing a lot better job of that than we are. And some of the issues with some of in the lower income brackets is the availability of the rest of the system, the computer access and training how to use it. Now the city does provide access to computer systems we had a computer lab at the Midtown Community Center. We have a number of computers set up and ready to assist anyone who has a need to use them. I know the library, when it's open and running, they have a series of computers that are available. So there is an opportunity at a number of locations for assistance using those systems.
Very good. One other question: is there a date by which work needs to be done for those that have gotten permits for whether residential or commercial construction, or is it just the application and approval of the permit that needs to be within this 90 days period to have the fees waived? Is there a work by which the date by which the work needs to be finished?
Our intent is that 90-day period. We expect them to be in getting to a point of building something.
Right.
We're not wanting to sell a permit for them to hold on to it for a year or two. That's not our goal. So, I haven't been that engaged in the actual permitting process, but I can tell you that's our goal is when we issue permits, we want you to go out and build. make improvements in our community, provide housing, provide commercial structures. It's a great time to do it when the economy's down, because you can get a lot more done in most times cheaper.
An additional question that's come into the chat room: do you think the city will follow the open for business guidelines you're seeing from the state? Is the city planning to do it with or without other cities? Do you see taking the leadership role on that, or do you monitor what other municipalities do and kind of take some guidance from those as well?
We monitor what everybody's doing around the state, not just here in Volusia County. We pretty attuned to what's going on in South Florida as well as the rest of Florida. We know what we have 3 days a week. We have a discussion with the managers in Volusia County. As far as are we taking the lead? I don't want to say we're taking the lead. I think we are taking steps that are necessary to meet the needs of Daytona Beach. Now, in some cases, it may be ahead of others, but we're not trying to run the ship for anyone. We're trying to manage through this, this crisis in a way that meets our needs, and we're all in the same boat when it gets to ultimately working on issues that are broader than Daytona Beach. Certainly, we're going to be a part of that with the county, and the county is really the lead agency in many respects, primarily with the funding. They get funding that the local cities don't get, and we're just now beginning to see some recognition that there is a level of funding necessary at the local level that is not reaching the cities.
Very good. Well, I'll ask for everybody that's in the audience with us at the moment, if you've got any other questions, please offer those up in the chat. We've got one additional one to ask at the moment, so you'll have a minute or so to offer any additional questions. The question that was just posed is, what's the process for requesting rental assistance?
Rental assistance hasn't been thoroughly produced. We are working on a process right now. More than likely, we'll be using those agencies that currently provide rental assistance, and we would just augment their funding, and because there's great guidelines that have to be met anytime you're using CDBG funds, their income restrictions and those kind of things. So, but that has not been vetted out totally yet. That's something we are working on. It's not done yet.
I'm going to make an assumption here that the City of Daytona Beach website would be the best source to go for updates and additional information as that process is ironed out.
Absolutely, and it will. I'm being vague because we haven't really published or really developed all of the issues associated with that program, but we are going to come forward with a program, and the commission will be considering exactly how they'd like to see it put forward, but we're in the throes of really putting that part together.
Okay, all right. A couple more questions coming in. Would the city consider putting out a visitor social distancing guidelines as we reopen to protect residents, given tourism is such a heavy part of our local economy?
I don't know. It's somebody coming in from out of the area, and obviously if they're in the United States, they're aware of CDC guidelines and social distancing. We will certainly, if we see violations that could be harmful to our community, we're going to step forward and make sure we make them aware of those guidelines and ask them to follow them. And if they don't, then I'm sure we will see what we can do to encourage them. As far as putting out on our webpage is a great place for anybody to find those guidelines, and that's where we have them currently, and that's where we would expect them to find that information. My interaction with different tourists coming into the community, the first thing I do is go to the webpage and see, okay, how do they get to the beach? Where is the shopping? You know, what's open, what's closed, those kind of things. That's the typical thing. I think that most of us and most travelers use. So I think that's probably the best way of putting it out.
Very good. Here at the Daytona Regional Chamber, we're clearly the voice for business in the community. So what can the business community do? What needs do you have from the business community in terms of making decisions for proper reopening so that we can get the economy going and at the same time balance that with the safety and health and wellness of our community?
You know, I hope everybody's planning. And that's exactly what we have done. And we planned in the initial phases. We are now planning for the next phase, which is the reopening of the city, and how we're going to staff it. How are we going to fund it? Make sure we have funding available, and then what are some specific steps? How are we going to get the information out so the public knows we're open for business? And by and large, we never closed down. We did a lot of distance work with our staff at home, and that kept us pretty much up to date in all of the normal functions of the city. But there are, the one thing that kind of suffered along with everybody else's business, the Peabody's operation, the programs and the, allowing public to use gatherings in our parks and places. All those things we're planning those to start opening up, but we're not going to open them up until the state gives us direction and tells us it's okay to do it. But as far as the businesses go, I think you've got to do the same thing we're doing. You've got to plan, okay, how can I open up? Am I ready to open up? And then what are you going to need in the way of assistance from the city or any other agency to help you open up? Now, there are always limitations to what any of us can do. And I can tell you one thing, I don't think any city in Volusia County has stepped forward with stimulus programs like we have. And that's not saying that they're not as forward thinking. I think they are. Everybody has different resources and different needs, and each city is unique in its own way. But we were able to put our program forward, and we're very proud of that program. Now the real challenge is how do we keep it going, and how do we come out of this and still function as a viable city and a viable community. And that's really what we need the business community to do.
All right, that's good feedback. Thank you very much. Would there be any consideration to waive business license fees, maybe as a way to maybe be another spark of getting the economy going once we're on the other side of this?
Yeah, that's not a big issue for us. It's certainly not a large financial impact on the city. It's certainly something we can look at.
Yeah. Very good. I think probably the last question we've got from our audience, since tourism plays such an integral part in the city's lifeblood, would the city be open to reevaluating restrictions on short-term rentals?
There's litigation associated with that request. That's way beyond what we're doing currently. I don't think that it's that we're all totally closed to the short-term rental. I think there are issues that are legislative in nature that have to take place so that if we're going to address short-term rentals, it has some protection for the neighborhoods, and that's what's missing with what we have currently.
Okay, and I fibbed a little bit. We had one last question come in on this. So some of the major events that are held in the area, such as Biketoberfest, that the planning cycle for that would kind of be underway now with all of the restrictions in place and not knowing what interest of visitors is going to be like because of the outbreak. Has anything been discussed or changed regarding that process, or developing some new planning timelines to try and carry on major efforts like that after the outbreak?
I don't. We have not engaged in any planning associated with Biketoberfest type of activity. It really presents issues and challenges, I think, for any of us in trying to make sure it's a safe environment to have at that point in time. I think we do have to plan and evaluate, is there a way where that can occur where it doesn't endanger the spread of disease at the same time? I don't have the answer to that, but be happy to entertain anybody else has got an answer that'll help resolve that issue. We're going to be planning for things to open up and start to move forward as we get into the summer. The key is, can we make it safe in the way that we move forward with these events? That's the key. And the distancing, trying to keep 6 foot between every biker and person at a facility is a challenge. So that's going to hopefully we'll have some good news from the medical community that they've found the solution to treating this disease. That's what I think we all have to look forward to. Trust in their abilities and trust in the federal government's ability to encourage that.
Very good. Well, I think that is the last of our questions. So, Jim, thanks so much for taking a moment this morning to talk about the program and sharing that information with us. It's certainly valuable to our local businesses and our residents, and we appreciate the efforts of everybody at the city in trying to help navigate this situation.
Thanks, Ken. It's been a pleasure to chat with everybody. It's kind of a new thing for me, but I think we're probably going to see more of this as time goes on. Just to be able to communicate what, not only what we're doing, but what the community looks for and what the community needs. We're open for more of these. So we encourage you. You guys are to be commended for putting it on the table and kind of getting it kicked off. And we're happy to be a part of that as it goes on.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. Thanks to everyone for your support of the Daytona Regional Chamber of Commerce. We especially want to thank our sponsor for this program, Florida Power and Light. You'll see them as part of some other programs as we go forward. Don't forget, the recording of this session will be posted here very shortly on our COVID-19 resource page, as well as on our YouTube channel, and will be shared on the Chamber's social media outlets as well. So thanks so much for everyone. I hope the information was valuable. We wish you all happiness and healthiness, and we'll see you again very soon. So long, everybody.